A very good evening to each and every one of you gathered here, and a warm and hearty welcome to this particular session. We are very, very fortunate today to have in our midst Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, the Associate Editor and Principal Anchor at NDTV. It is indeed a real opportune moment for all of our students to have somebody as eminent as ma'am herself from the field of journalism to be addressing you all. So I think all us dear students should definitely make the most of this particular session. We are also joined in our panel today with Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph, the rector of the college. We also have here with us Reverend Father Gervasius Nongse, the director of the mass media department. We will also be joined very soon by Dr. Daman Bhalingdor, the IQAC coordinator. And we also have with us Professor Nathaniel D.N. Majau, who is lending us the technical expertise for this particular session. So before we go ahead and start the session and hand it over to our dear guest here, I would like to call Reverend Father Dr. Joby Joseph, the rector of the college, to lead us in prayer. Over to you, Father.
Thank you, Ma'am Rose. On this wonderful, opportune moment, we want to turn ourselves to the Almighty, to God. Let's place ourselves in the presence of God, Father, Son, and the Spirit. But our Father, we thank you for this unique, wonderful opportunity. And we ask you to be with us, to bless this day, bless all of us. We pray in a very special way for Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, her family, her intentions, and her work. We pray that all of us always live by truth, profess truth, and in word, in deed, be witness to the truth. And as we listen and understand the world of media reporting and that is associated, we pray for all journalists in the field who take pain to bring truth and bring truth to the world, to us, guide them, lead them. And we listen to a small reading from the Holy Scriptures of the Bible, Psalm 139. And Lord, this is our prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any evil in me, and lead me in the way of truth and everlasting. In your precious name, Lord, we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father. And now to introduce our guest, I would like to call upon Reverend Father Gervasius Nongse, the director of the mass media department. Over to you, Father.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ma'am Rose. Am I audible?
Yes, Father, you are audible. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor needs no introduction actually from any one of us, because we could see and we could hear her every day, almost every day on NDTV. Nevertheless, let me just introduce to you, in case some of us might not have had much knowledge about her. Let me just tell you something about her. So Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor is an associate editor and principal anchor in NDTV, as we all know. She started working for NDTV in 2010 and is known for her trailblazing reporting on several issues in the country. She is widely praised for her exclusive coverage of the JNU incident, where she actually faced extreme difficulties while trying to unravel the truth there. She was the top nominee for the Asian Television Awards in Singapore for her rigorous coverage of Nirbhaya case. For her steadfast attitudes towards her work, she was also awarded the MT Young Journalist of the Year Award. She was the moderator of the FICCI Global Young Leadership Summit in 2020 on the topic Youth, the Changing Face of Politics. And she has won the ENBA Young Journalist of the Year Award in 2020, that is last year. So her feats and fame know no bounds, for her unfaltering dedication to her work never ceases. And she is currently delineating about the global pandemic, vaccines, coronavirus, and its double and triple mutations, answering the questions and apprehensions of the people accurately through her scrupulous research and meticulous coverage of the same on NDTV FYI. So thank you so much, Ms. Sonal, for accepting our invitation. I'm sure the students, the staff, and everyone who will be listening to this webinar will benefit immensely from your sharing this evening. So thank you so much once again, all the best. And whenever you come to Shillong, please do come and visit us. Here we are right at the heart of Shillong, and it's such a beautiful place with beautiful weather. So whenever you come, please do come. Most welcome to you. Once again, thank you so much, and welcome, Ms. Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor.
Thank you so much, Father, for that wonderful introduction. And all of you who are watching this session, please make sure to make the most of having this really eminent personality from the field of journalism joining here for this for this one-on-one session with you, especially my dear students. The topic for today's session, of course, is selling content versus providing news, a journalist's view. However, I would like to tell all of the audiences, our students especially, that please feel free to ask any questions. And by any, I mean to say, of course, related to the field of journalism and the topic at hand, of course. And do make sure that you put in your questions in the chat box. And Ma'am Sonal will definitely try answering all of those questions that you have. So without wasting any time now, I would like to hand over the session to Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Over to you, ma'am, and thank you once again for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much, and lovely introduction. Thank you, and lovely prayer. I must say, this is something that people at the journalism school should be doing, and this is something people should actually start by doing. Just the importance of truth, I think, so integral to everything that we're doing. So thank you so much. And to all the students, well, journalism is everybody aspiring to be journalist as well. I think Father said it perfectly and beautifully over there, that if there is one guiding light, if there is one North Star when it comes to this field of journalism, it is that. It is truth, and that is that. It starts and ends over there. But we are at a very exciting phase of our lives on how, and I often say this to kids and to anybody aspiring for journalism as well, that journalism is ever evolving, like human beings, like behavior, like generations. So this is something, there is no absolute one way of looking at journalism or understanding how it is. It is constantly evolving, and all of us are trying to evolve with it. The topic is very fascinating, selling content versus providing news. Content, selling content sounds like everything that is happening on Instagram right now, everything that's happening on TikTok and other social media platforms. So where is the space for news? What is news? Questions like these often come to us. And to understand that, what I've got for you is just an understanding of how news has evolved in the past 10 years alone. I've been in the industry for the past 10 years or so, and my own understanding of news, my own understanding of people, their stories, of politics and policies, that has also changed over the years. And if I were to put it into three compartments, this is how it would go. So let's go back in time a little and understand how news, the traditional form of news, used to be. Or since I'm from television, let me take that television perspective for you. So back at the time, you will all remember the Anna Hazare movement, I guess. Everybody's very familiar with it. It brought in a new change, not just the way people were thinking, but even politically, contributed immensely to the demise of one particular government and the rise of the other. It led to a huge uproar and people participation in politics, people really coming forward and demanding a voice, wanting a say in things. It started with corruption, went on to Nirbhaya case as well. So there's this entire phase, which is what I call the OB phase of news television. This was the OB phase where it was all about bringing live updates. You had to be somewhere and you had to be at a spot and you could talk about how this is happening right now. This is something that was very new and fascinating at that point, minute by minute, 24/7, trying to understanding of what exactly was going on. When was Anna Hazare eating, not eating? What was his blood pressure? What was Arvind Kejriwal doing? What was Kiran Bedi doing at that time? Who came to meet him? Who went out? Who are the kind of people coming in? What are the stories? Similar thing happened when the Nirbhaya case happened as well, right? So this was the entire live phase where news got really consumed, and people, since it was a people's movement, they wanted to get an update every minute. They didn't want to rely on a newspaper or anything to understand and to really catch on the pulse of people on who was coming there, why were they coming there, what brought them, why were parents bringing their kids, why were kids bringing their parents at times, grandparents and grandkids coming at the same time, families, students, all of it was such a congregation. And I remember standing there at the Ramlila Maidan and being, and in news what we have is something called a standee. So they prepare a bit of a pedestal so that we can have a bird's eye view on what's happening. I remember standing there and just getting so consumed by so much happening. It was like a mela. It was like a full human orchestra in playing. That is what it used to be. And that time, the news used to be just about reporting. You see, you tell. You catch up on someone and you tell them what it is. Then came, that went on for quite some time. And that was also the phase when we were shoving mics in front of people, trying to understand, you tell us, and we need answers, and enough is enough. The famous nation wants to know, and all of that happened. And then gradually came in, without even us realizing, another era of news. This was the Twitter era. This was social media really taking over how news was consumed. This was the time when news had to be defined in 120 characters. It was a time when you earlier had to go to have proximity with, say, a person or a politician or a minister. You had to know them. They had to know you for you to understand, get an interview, do things. Now, time had changed. If they wanted to give a bite, if they wanted to say an opinion, it all moved to Twitter. People would just put out their resignations on Twitter. New policies were coming out on Twitter. New arrangements were being made, comments were being taken. And then suddenly we realized the importance of social media because it did two things. It sort of gave politicians a direct contact with their audience, with their people, with democracy at large. And then even journalists kept thinking that, okay, we don't, and politicians mostly understood that they didn't need journalists to be their mouthpiece. They didn't need journalists and journalism per se and television per se to be a platform. They thought we can write directly on Twitter and people are going to read it anyways. And anyways, it'll get picked up by news. So that was the second very fascinating phase of Twitter. And now, post all of that happening on Twitter, post content being filtered and censored on Twitter, we are in this post-truth world. The third phase, as I like to call it, the first was the OB phase, the live phase. Second was the Twitter phase. Now this is the post-truth phase, where information, reactions, opinions, everything is available online. So what is the relevance of news? How do you still differentiate between what is the stuff that is required for a thriving democracy? What is the stuff that makes it important for people to know? Stuff that not politicians do not want to say, but this is becoming prime responsibility of a journalist to exactly bring you that stuff that needs and requires to be hidden by the politicians, right? And we are now in this phase where we are all still trying to understand on what makes good news, what will make the viewer sit up and understand, what will make the viewer get away from Instagram for a minute, stop looking at their phones, stop listening to radio, stop any podcast that might be playing, but just take notice of news. We are in an industry where we are fighting for attention, right? And now, as we still figure out, my own sense is that we are moving towards a time where analysis, where differentiation between fake news and news will become really important. We're also moving towards a time when our audiences, when the country at large is becoming very, very young. and they don't want to consume news in this very age-old traditional way. So we are now trying to, and this is my personal sort of understanding of things, we are now getting to a phase where we'll have to try and give out news to our viewers the way they like it. We have to sort of ease and find their appetite and feed to that. So why have I told you this story? Just to weave it all together and go back to what our topic was today about selling content and providing news. I think as we move forward in this journey and as things will keep changing as well of our lives, the only way to stay relevant is by adapting forms of telling news while staying true to the core news per se. For example, what am I really saying over here? News will still remain to be relevant. What is happening? Look at COVID, for example. Never before has news been more relevant. Never before has information been more relevant. This was literally the matter of life and death. You knowing what is proning saved lives. You knowing what is double mutation. You knowing why you're required to do double masking and when you're required to do double masking, when to ventilate your house. All of that was crucial to people's life. And thus, moving forward, I believe we'll have to change the ways in which we are delivering news. The platform might change and the delivery style might change. Maybe we're not that BBC style reporting and news anchoring anymore, and more chatty, more conversational, more looking into the viewer's eyes and telling them, listen, I'm one of you. I know what you're going through and I'll tell you how to get out of it. But still, the content that you're putting out being very centric to what is the core ethos of news, which according to me, or how I grew up in the time when news was being discussed and what inspired me to become a journalist at that point was only this one mantra: to try and give voice to people who did not have one, to stay true to what was really happening, to show a mirror to the society, and not be an activist per se, but to leave them with a thought, to leave people with something to think about. I don't think any, or my own personal journey, at least when I started out in journalism, I thought I'm going to change the world. I still believe I can change the world, but one step at a time, one dream, one conversation, one thought at a time. And that's why I feel as we move forward in this journey, we are looking at a time where we'll not be selling content, but we'll be selling different forms and modes and selling news in those different forms and modes. That is my 2 bits on what is really happening with the news at the moment and how in my own journey, I've seen news change and reform and adapt itself. I'll throw it open to all of you now. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to take them. I see there's some that have come in the chat box already.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. That was really very interesting, actually. Once again, a reminder to all of our participants here of this particular session, please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box that you see, and we are definitely going to take those questions, and Ma'am Sonal will definitely answer them. She's here for, she's, so that was really very interesting, ma'am. Thank you so much. I think what you spoke about post-truth is something so relevant and something so interesting, actually, the way the news media has changed over the years. I think those are some very relevant questions. I think we already have one question, so I was going to ask you something, but I think we already have a question here. So I'm going to first take the question of Gargi Bhomik here wants to know, what is then the best way to consume news and stay informed? Yeah.
Okay, so very important question. This is what I get asked a lot of times on what do we watch? There's so much of information out there and we don't have time. And can you tell us this one place where we can go and consume all news? Well, the fact is we live in a very, very polarized, not just country, but world. It is what's the phenomena of the right wing versus the left wing is not just happening in India per se, but happening across the world. So in a world like that, where opinions and information is going to be so polarized, I think the best way to have an open mind and keep yourself informed is about reading both sides of the story. So This is what Twinkle Khanna had once said, and I truly believe you should have a house where you're running a very right-wing news and a very left-wing news for the same time. You should perhaps, so imagine this, imagine Nasruddin Shah and Shah Rukh Khan, right? So these are two ends of the spectrum when it comes to news. So I don't want to take names over here, but there are several news channels and papers as well, which are two different ends of the spectrum. Read both. If this is an issue that concerns you, try and sort of encapsulate as much information as you can, because the only key to having an informed opinion is knowing what's happening on the other side. And in my own little way, I feel that's the only way we'll be able to make this world less polarized as well, because we'll be able to open ourselves to conversations which is wary or sort of different to what we've been thinking or what we believe or what we've been sort of brought up in an environment which makes us believe only one side of the story. So I hope that answers your question. My thing is read all different kinds of newspapers, watch all different kinds of news as well. And if you say are reading something about very close to where you all the stuff that happened at the border between Assam and other states over there, we saw several reports, one thing on one side, one thing on the other. What is the best way to consume news? How do you know what's the truth? Because you can't trust your source anymore. Everything is so polarized. So read information on both sides. Hear what the Assam government is saying and also hear the others. That's the only way you will be able to arrive in your own head at a conclusion. I hope that answers the question.
I think it definitely does. So we have a lot more here. So there is one question from a participant who is viewing the session on YouTube. And the participant asks, okay, this is, hi there, related to the topic. I'd like to ask, why do the news channels prefer political topics over more recent news and important matters? No offense, this might trigger some people. Yeah, this is the question. Yeah, over to you, ma'am.
No, it's not triggering any people over here at least, or I can talk about myself. No, so this is an important question. In fact, so when I started out in journalism and I used to do ground reporting, and how the journey happens generally in television is you start out as a city reporter, you do crime, you do other stuff, and you gradually move on to politics, and you cover ministries, and you, if you want to, then you can get into anchoring and you do debates and all of that. And I remember if you were to ask this question to a 20-year-old Sonal who had just started out as cover reporting, I would say politics is trash. Nothing happens. It's just for people and for journalists who want to, sort of have that proximity to power, and journalists and politicians to have that fake sense of power as well by being on television. This is what I used to think then. Cut to 10 years down the line, I have learned the fact that everything in this country is actually circles back to politics. It circles back to policy. It circles back to the intent of your leader, your minister, your local MLA, MP, your mayor, whoever in charge it might be. So politics is key. Politics is what the basis of democracy in this country also is. Not commenting on the current state of it, but it is important. And I figured this now. But I agree that a lot of times politics is also easy to do on television. It is easy to put two people and let them fight it out and just enjoy with some popcorn. In our case, just baith jaiye. It's easy to do that. A lot of times that is why it also happens. But as we're moving forward, this is something I'm very conscious about. That's why I do this show on NDTV called FII, For Your Information. This is a program where we're not doing any politics. We're not calling people either. I explained to you the third era, right? The post-truth era, where information is getting key because you don't know how to separate fake from real. And on that platform, we try at least to decode news for you. It's a complicated subject where we'll try and decode it and tell you what matters. What is it in it for you, the viewer? So, for example, we did a show recently about all these medals are happening, right? Olympics, such an exciting time for the country. Every dreams are being made and formed. People are looking at your boxers from the north and the northeast and saying, hey, I can do that as well, right? I should also try and do this. Sachin Tendulkar very famously said it was after the World Cup that he let go of his tennis racket and put a bat in his hand, right? So this is an exciting time, but is it really a viable career option? So we did an entire show on how much is it that Olympians earn, for example. How long does it take to actually get to a level where you qualify as an Olympian? Or what is life after your Olympic medals? Or what is the life of a sports person post their prime years when they don't compete? So we are trying, and at least at our level, we are a very small team. But just like all of you, I also want to look at news and consume news, which has information, which can trigger a thought and opinion. So we're trying to do that, but I agree there is much more that can be done, and primetime news can be not just politics, but much more. And I can say that we're all internally constantly having these conversations amongst ourselves to try and make that happen more. Maybe once all of you are part of us, maybe the tide will turn then.
For sure, definitely. Thank you. Then we have another question here by Subhadeep Sarkar. He asks, is it always easy to stay neutral while reporting?
Well, very difficult. And I have always debated this in my mind, not just reporting, but even while anchoring. How do you stay neutral? Do I take a stand? Do I not take a stand? And again, this is something which is going to be different for every journalist. But for me, what have I done? I figured out that there were certain issues where it was, so if it comes to politics, I don't take a stand on air. And when I'm reporting, anchoring, whatever it is, I don't take a stand. I hear both sides of the story, I point out facts, and I let the viewer decide on what's happening. But and again, I'm saying this with the writer that I apply this to myself. I don't know if this is every journalist and every anchor, every reporter will have their own sort of filters. For me, when it comes to social issues, when it comes to women's rights, gender issues, that's when I have often felt myself compelled to take a stand. If a Nirbhaya is happening, well, I don't know if all of you know, but I was watching Life of Pi in the same theater as Nirbhaya at that night when she was raped. And I was the same age. I was there with a male friend of mine as well. The only difference was I had a car and she did not, and she had to take public transport. When stuff like that happens, and that young you are, and you're looking at the stuff around you and the facilities around you and how vulnerable and how easy it is to prey on women in this country, you realize that you have to take a stand. You have to stand up and you have to become that voice. You have to compel conversations, change it inside drawing rooms, inside parliament, and ultimately in ways of laws as well, and make it happen. So to sort of cut that long story short, I feel when it comes to social issues, gender, like I said, or issues of inequality, or if it is of caste, etc., I've seen myself getting more compelled to take a stand on air. But when it comes to politics, I've tried to stay as neutral as possible.
True, that's true. Well said. I would. There are two other questions. In fact, I think you can take both the questions together. One is from L. Waniyang, who asks, "How should we know what to believe in?" And the other is from Pratisha Kar, who says, "Good evening, ma'am. What is the best way to avoid fake news?"
I think both questions are related, and I think I partly answered that earlier as well. The only way to know what is true and what is not is by consuming a lot of news and reading a lot of papers. Don't just watch NDT, you watch other channels. Don't just read Hindu or Express. Read Times of India and Hindustan Times at times. Read Navbharat Times at times, right? So flood yourself with the information on both sides. And for me, the basic rider is, if you find something, and especially fake news is something that is not happening on mainstream media at all, actually. Fake news is actually happening on your WhatsApp mostly. And I witness it all the time. My mother will send me, "Oh, did you know?" And I'll get some message from my mother and I have to say, "Oh God, Mama, you can't fall for this. This is fake." And how do I have that filter? And I've often wondered, how is it that I have that filter and she does not? Because for me, I'm consumed with so much news around me. I know the reality so well that I know that there cannot be one papad and khakra that will cure COVID. I know for a fact that there cannot be one dose or one powder that you will mix somewhere and then it will cure you of COVID. It doesn't work like that, because I understand what COVID is and what kind of a virus is it. What does it do to you when it enters your body? So why am I able to make that differentiation, and perhaps anybody sitting at home in my own household is not? Because I've just consumed myself. I have kept myself with everything that is happening. So when slightly off, and I'm like, this can't be right. Let me dig in a little more. And I have always told people, don't trust me. Don't trust. A lot of people go out and say, oh, this is the best, this is the bad, gold standard, and this is silver standard, and this is this and this, that kind of news. Read everything, watch everything. You know what is the best. And once you do that, you'll be able to arrive at the right decision.
That's great. Ma'am, I think we will just take this, the next question here, the next two questions here, and probably, if it is okay with you. We have the two questions here. How would you manage this?
Yeah, we can take one more. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So in fact, I think both are somehow related, and then I think we can wind up after that. How would you manage? How would you manage the stress of tight deadlines? And how has your life changed after becoming a journalist? Can you highlight some of the changes that really had positive impacts in your life? Yes.
Well, don't ask me, ask my family. They'll have a full book to write about what happens to the life of a journalist. But so how do you handle stress? Well, I wish I knew. But what has worked for me, I can share that. I have tried to surround myself with people who are not as mad and crazy and mavericks about news that I am. So I'm in a family where when I come back home and I drive back home, get some sleep. That is what happens on all good days. But there are not many good days in journalism. Breaking news for all of you. And as you grow older, as you get more experience, you learn to exercise a certain degree of filtering in your mind where you're able to feel a little saner. And I wouldn't be lying if I say that there have been moments when I felt very weak and distraught, and I felt I was losing my sense of mental health. It has happened to the best of us. It has happened to me as well. The point is, I figured this was happening. I took a break. I came back and tried to put things in order. At times, what happens is you're so close to stuff that is happening around you. It is very difficult to put in barriers. I remember when we were reporting stories from Badayu, and or when we were reporting stories on good stories, bad stories, and they're mostly bad stories, unfortunately, that deserve everybody's attention, and they have to be spoken about because good stuff everybody will say anyways, right? So mostly, and you feel like, wow, this is, how do I go back and enjoy my good cup of cappuccino when I know somebody else is dying out there of hunger? Or how do I go back and fill myself or buy a new jacket when I know that there are so many right outside in the national capital, a few kilometers away, who are dying because of the cold and they don't even have a blanket on themselves. So these are tough situations. These are things which require a lot of experience, maturity, but it comes with times, and I can say this, it does get easier. And if you all do decide to pursue journalism, which I hope you do, I can guarantee you that a lot of us, when we came in the mad world of journalism just consumed us, we didn't know how to go about with it. But you'll have us, you'll have an entire generation guiding you on what to do and how to do. So things are going to get easier. And so there will be good days, bad days, but you will also have, actually, let me tell you that you will also have stories that you have done that have changed people's life, and that will make all the stress and the panic attacks that you get all worth it. I still get calls from people who because of a story I did, they got a job, or they managed to find their children because of our broadcasting, or there was a little boy who was actually dying out of cancer. One of the first stories that I covered, my first on camera, happened when I was covering a story of this little boy, 8 years old, who had cancer. He was from Bihar, and he was staying in a public loo. You could still smell like fresh ammonia right there. And he would go for his chemotherapy inside AIMS in the morning and would stay there with his wife. They had sold off their land, their shop, everything to just get the treatment of that boy, and I couldn't believe what was happening. We managed to show that story. The built-in viewers wrote in. We managed to sponsor his entire health and his entire treatment plan, but we couldn't save him for a very long time. But his last wish was to actually be an Air Force pilot. So for the first time, the oldest Air Force base and the largest one in Ambala, they opened their gates, they got their uniform stitched for that little boy, and he lived his dream. He's not with us anymore, but he lived his last day, and his father still calls me and tells me how it wouldn't have been possible had we not given him that platform. So, like I said, it's just one good story or one nice thing that you do. It's like a regular day. You might have had a mad day at work, but one good gesture by somebody who's just driving by next to you leaves you feel very fulfilled. Journalism is like that. One good story and you will feel you found your purpose. You're doing something right in your life. It has impacted lives. And for me, that has been, I've looked back at the lives I've touched, the impact we have managed to make, and be just thankful and grateful for having this kind of platform, because there are so many others who don't.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am. That was really a very beautiful story that you shared, and also so insightful and so much passion for your job. That's really, really amazing. And we have so many other questions here that the students have, of course, but then I do know we are hard pressed with time. And in fact, ma'am has actually taken this few minutes to be here with us, and we really appreciate that. And also not to worry, my dear students, because ma'am Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor will be joining us again in September. So you can reserve all of these questions for then, and we can have a more interactive session and hopefully a slightly longer time maybe. So that has been lovely. Before we wind off, I would like to call the coordinator of the IQAC, Dr. Daman Bhalingdor, for the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ma'am Rose. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir, you can be heard.
So first and foremost, thank you so much, Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor, for a wonderful session and for sharing your stories. I'm sure everybody loved it. And also thank you to Sir Nathaniel, who's part of the technical team. And without him, the event would not be a success. And also finally to Ma'am Rosemary for hosting such a wonderful program. And on the whole, thank you to the college. So with this, thank you, and over to you, Ma'am Rosemary.
Thank you so much, sir. My dear students, you do know that you are going to get e-certificates for being a part of this session. So please do not forget to fill up the feedback form, which we shall put up in the chat box. So make sure that you click on that form and you fill in your feedback, and the certificates are yours as well. That said and done, I think this has been an absolutely, absolutely lovely session. Ma'am Sonal Mehrotra, Kapoor, you have definitely, I think, inspired our students. There are so many who would definitely like to follow your footsteps, or at least be inspired to do beautiful things and set on beautiful journeys in their future careers and their future lives as well. I think with that, we have come to an end to this particular program. Once again, thank you, ma'am, and see you again in September very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you so much.